Hello, welcome to the Counterattack playthrough series. It's been a while. We're going to be doing a playthrough of Next War Poland from GMT Games, designer Mitchell Land, and the system designs by Gene Billingsley of GMT. So let's check it out. Okay, here I have the first scenario set up. There's two sets of rules in this game. There's the standard rules and the advanced rules. I'm really interested in the advanced rules, but I'm starting with the standard ones, which simplify some things. This is the first scenario is called the Suwalki Gap. And hey, if you're a Polish speaker, I'm going to mispronounce the Polish place names. I'm sorry. But anyway, yeah, so let's go check it out. Now, one thing in this setup, it uses just a portion of the map. There's actually two maps, so I folded the one map just so I can fit it onto my table. And then I went ahead and demarcated with like control markers the actual play area, because the scenario only uses this section of the map. You might see some like bunch of garbage over here. Like there's also like I need to do some records tracking, and that's on another map, I believe, that I don't have space at the moment to place. So I'm using like hex row 0 to mean 0, hex row 1 to mean 1. So I'm tracking some things over there. But yeah, so let's dive in and check out things in detail. Unfortunately, the orientation of this scenario makes it hard to fit into the view screen completely, so I'll probably have to pan around a bit, but yeah, let's go check out the details. Okay, at the start of this scenario, the Russians and Belarusians have already invaded Poland, and theoretically have already conquered Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Now they're pushing into Poland, into the Suwalki Gap. And what that is, that's like basically just the land area of Poland in between Kaliningrad, which the border of it's around here somewhere. It's kind of hard for me to see through the viewfinder, but it's around here. So, you know, Russia actually has like a little piece of land that's disconnected from mainland Russia. It's to the north of Poland and the west of Lithuania. So, so that's up there. And then Belarus is down here a bit. These borders over here. So this is called the Suwalki Gap because it's, I guess, a gap between the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad and the rest of Russia and its ally Belarus. And in fact, it's named that because there's a city here called Suwalki. So anyway, this scenario starts with the battle already started. Like I said, the Russians have already pushed into Poland, and the Polish are battered. You can see there a lot of the units have a stripe on them indicating they've been reduced in strength through combat. There's an American armored cavalry regiment, so the Americans are helping defend Poland, and they are occupying Suwalki, but it looks pretty serious here. And then if we go down further south in this area, we can see the Belarusians are pushing in from the east, and they're trying to take Bialystok at the start of this scenario. And again, we got, looks like a unit of the 82nd Airborne is defending that, along with a Polish recon unit that's been reduced. So what else we have around here? Well, when you're like playing the full game or maybe bigger scenarios, there's actually a strategic map with that doesn't have hexagons, and you can have units like move from that onto this map and vice versa. So this is an Mi-24. I think that's a Hind. Very nice Russian helicopter. So that's off in the strategic map of Belarus, but since I'm not putting the map on the table, that's where it is. So that's representing where it is. For this guy to move on to here, it has a movement of 12. You have to spend 7 points to get on here. That represents like traversing from the strategic map to this is the operational map. So that guy's off map. These allied units here that I set up, this is a French paratrooper unit. I think that's Belgian paratroopers. And then the Poles actually have Hinds as well, with longer range, interestingly. So the start of the scenario says like I get to set these guys up anywhere there's already units. So I have to go decide where to reinforce them. And then this Hind can go anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and put it outside the play area, which I think is fine. It says it can go anywhere in Poland. And the reason I think it's fine is because I'm supposed to set up an American 82nd Airborne Apache attack helicopter squadron, or whatever the unit size is there. And also outside the play area, the Russians have a Hind unit as well as an Mi-28. I'm trying to remember what that is. It might be like a werewolf. I think that might be the name of it. I might be mistaking that. That might be a KA something. But anyway, there's some fancier Russian helicopter than a Hind there. So I guess first things first, I need to set up these other two NATO units. And I suppose I should describe the victory conditions. So there are 5 cities worth victory points. These ones up here are worth 2 points. And sorry again to my Polish friends, Elk, Oleko, Augusto, and Suwalki. So those are all worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. It's a 3-turn game. And then Bialystok, which is not classified as a city, it's an urban area, which I think is like a more spread out type of area. That's worth 4 points. Okay, so whoever has the most points wins. If it's a tie, it's a tie. So yeah, let's decide where we're gonna put these guys here. Quick comment about these units. These are, to my opinion, pretty powerful units. They have an attack and a defense of 3. That's those first 2 numbers. I mean, that's not a lot, but like if I put them in an urban area, for example, the defense doubles. So that's cool. Their movement's only 4, but their movement is a yellow number that indicates that they're light infantry, and light infantry get bonuses in some of the denser terrain. They can more easily bypass like zones of control. We'll talk about that in a bit. But possibly the most important part is they have a high efficiency rating of 6. I mean, that's not the highest, but that comes into play in quite a few things, like whether you can ignore a retreat, whether you can successfully retreat through a zone of control. It helps with actual combat if your opponent doesn't have as high of an efficiency value. So they can help bolster otherwise weaker units with this efficiency value. And also they can be paradropped and things like that, but I'm not sure if that's really going to happen. So I want to put these guys somewhere they can help. And I think I have an idea. So let's take a look at Bialystok first. This is not where I want them. I'll just give a sort of idea behind what I'm talking about here. So Bialystok is defended by the American 82nd Airborne, the 1st Brigade of the 82nd Airborne, and its defense is 4, so that's decent defense. And it's a leg unit, so I know that because leg units are either light infantry movement type or just a black number. So all light infantry are leg units, and leg units are doubled in an urban area. And Bialystok is an urban area, this like fully filled in hex of city. So they're going to have double defense, so that's pretty good. And then there's still a Polish recon unit here. They will not be double defense, but that'll add a little help there. And we have some strong forces here from Belarus. In particular, they have a lot of support from rocket artillery. But I feel there are other areas up north that are in more danger, and maybe Bialystok can at least hold out 1 turn, hopefully more, but there'll be some reinforcements coming in from NATO on the following turns. So just to note, the Belarusians do have some helicopter support as well. But yeah, we're not going to reinforce this. Okay, so what I'm more concerned about is up here in the north. There's a lot of Russian forces around, Suwalki. And so I'm nervous there. There's also not much defense in Oleko, only a 2 defense. And these are not urban areas. So even with the leg infantry here in Suwalki, I'm not going to get like a double defense or anything. Also, Augusto only has 2 defense as well. So looking at these places, I only have 2 units to place. I kind of feel the forces outside Augusto are not that strong. There's a 2 attack recon and a 3 attack motorized infantry. And there's this Polish mechanized unit here that theoretically could help out. So I feel like this might hold out for a turn, but I'm really nervous about this. I mean, the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment is depleted. Yeah, there's a lot of force here. So I think I want to reinforce Suwalki. And the stacking value, each space can stack up to 4 stacking points, and there's 1, 2, 3 here, so I can stack one more, and each of those paratrooper units I have are only one. The other place I'm nervous about is Aleko. I feel it can fall easily. It's only got a 2 defense mechanized unit. This guy over here, even if he had a chance to move over there, like he's not that much help, and he would be opening up a flank and allowing elk down here to fall more easily. So both these units that I'm bringing in are the same strength, so I guess it doesn't matter where I put them. So I think I'll put the Belgians in Aleko, so that'll solidify that, and the French with the Americans at Suwalki, and hope for, you know, I can hold off some cities in time for reinforcements. There is a penalty to fighting with mixed formations, with mixed nationalities. There are some exceptions. For example, the British and Canadians, I believe, don't have that penalty. There's a few other things like that too, I believe. But anyway, the French and Americans do suffer a little bit. You know, there's a little language barrier and that kind of thing. So yes, so I think we're going to do that. Now, the final act of setup is that the non-allied side needs to reduce 1 armored unit and 2 motorized infantry units that are within 3 spaces of an allied unit. And, you know, I kind of looked all around. They're only mechanized units for the Belarusians, so there aren't any there, so it's just Russians. There is a motorized unit out here, but it's kind of weak on this edge of the front. So I think I'm going to do the 2 motorized units here, which, you know, they don't have much of a chance of taking Aleko at the moment. So we'll go ahead and flip them over. And they're in looks like a city that has already been taken before the scenario started. And then the armor unit, well, I have a tough choice. Like, I don't want to flip one of these white armor units. There's one here and one up here, because they're so flexible in that there's no penalty to operating with other formations, unlike, you know, a colored unit. But if I flip like this armored unit, my first punch attacking Suwalki is going to be much less. Well, I don't know about much. Like a 5 would flip to a 3, but yeah, I think I want a lot of strength on this first turn. So perhaps against my better judgment, I'm going to flip this First Guards tank brigade from the Western Military District over to its reduced side. Okay, and we are ready to roll. Now, I have the standard game sequence of play off to the side. There's also an advanced game sequence of play. So normally you would start with the weather phase, but in this scenario we're going to skip a bunch of phases, but I'll just tell you what the ones we're skipping. We're going to skip the weather phase, we're going to skip the supply phase, which is optional, but I want to play with, skipping the initiative air naval phase, and we're doing part of the initiative, movement, and combat phase. Initiative, movement, and combat phase. And that word initiative, it was in 2 of the phase names. That is a concept in this game where one side has the initiative. They are doing much better, they're more dynamic than the other side. And in this scenario, the non-allied side, the Russians and Belarusians, start with the initiative. And that means they get like extra moves and attacks compared to the non-initiative player, which is NATO right now. So we're doing that phase, and the first segment is the movement segment. But this scenario says, also skip that. Start with the initiative combat segment. So in this, the initiative player has to declare and resolve combats. And so that's how this scenario is set up. They've like theoretically already done their initiative movement, got in position, they're ready for combat. Okay, here's a close-up of Suwalki. So the initiative combat segment, and I'm not going to go through every little step in detail for every combat, but for this first turn I will. So first we have to declare our attacks one at a time. So the Russians are going to declare an attack here. They're going to declare an attack on Suwalki. And then we have to compute the initial odds. So let's sort of separate these things out. So we're going to have all 3 of these armored units attack. So it's going to be 15 attack strength. That's the first number, 5. And then we'll have the second guard's motorized or mechanized infantry attack with them as well. So that's going to be 21 attack strength, okay? Let's take a look at the defense strength. We have, looks like 10. So that's 2 to 1. But there's some things we would also want to look at. Well, we want to look at the defender's terrain. Now it's a city, but it's also what's called flat. A lot of games call that clear. In this game it's flat. And some things that might affect your combat strengths are listed in the terrain area. For example, if the attacker has armor and there's no armor for the defender in flat terrain, the armor strength doubles. So these 15 points would double to 30. Fortunately, this one armored cavalry regiment counts as armor. Or mech, either one of those can cancel this armor bonus. So fortunately that is happening. Also, mech infantry, which there is a mech infantry on the attack here. If there was no mech or armor in the defense, its combat factors would be multiplied by 1.5, so it would go up to 4.5, I guess 4. So, okay, fortunately for the Allies, they have that armored cavalry regiment in there. But anyway, the initial odds is 21 to 10, so that's a 2 to 1 odds. So next we're going to determine column shifts, allocate attack helicopters and air points. Well, I'll go through these things. Resolve air defense, fire for any of those, figure out some die roll modifiers, then we'll roll the die and figure out who loses what, if any. So I think I'm going to go over to the combat results table to go over some things. All right, here's the combat results table. So we computed the initial odds at 2 to 1. Now this is an interesting table. There's a lot of stuff below it too, like modifiers and stuff. So first, over on the left-hand side, you find the terrain that's being attacked. So it's flat or flat woods column, or row, I should say. So it is flat. It has a city in it, but the city is not as important as the terrain the city is surrounded by. So it's flat. So we come across and find the 2 to 1 column. See, there's other 2 to 1 columns for different terrains. So the terrain has a large effect on the column shifts. So we're here in this like 9 column because it's flat and 2 to 1. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw this little combat odds marker there so we know it's 2 to 1 in that column. Now let's compute some column shifts. We're going to come down here, just give you an idea of these column shifts. So when the attack is done, announced, you have to pick a lead unit from each side. One of the units has to be the lead for the attack. And then you compare the efficiency ratings of those lead units. And whichever side has like the better unit, you can get some column shifts. Basically, you subtract the efficiency of the attacker from the defender or vice versa. Attacks into cities or fortifications shift 2 columns left. Okay, so we know there's a city there. There's going to be a 2-column shift to the left. If there was surprise, there might be some column shifts. There's no surprise. That's a scenario-defined thing. Exploitation combat, 2-column shifts to the left. So to the left is bad for the attacker, just so you know. We're not doing exploitation combat. We'll cover these things later. Amphibious, not for this scenario. Artillery brigade support, 1-column shift to the left. The attacker can have as many as 2 artillery supporting the attack. The defender 1. Okay, so let's go take a look at the efficiency, possible artillery brigades, and attacking into a city. Let's go back to the map. Okay, well, there's a city there, so we are going to get 2 ships to the left as a NATO, so they're happy with that. So cities are good to defend in. So lead units. So the attacker, they have to pick a lead unit. The efficiency ratings are on the side here. We got a 6, a 6, and a 6, a 6, and a 6. So they're all 6. So those are all good. Now the issue with this is if there are losses, the lead unit will take the first loss no matter what. So I have to decide like, who's going to take that first loss? I'm inclined to have this motorized infantry lead since it's a 6 and it's not as nice as these other units. So we'll go ahead and declare this guy leading. Now the defenders, they could declare, for example, these French paras, and since it has a rating of 6 also, then they just, it's a wash. There's no bonus to either side in terms of the efficiency rating. But we do have this American unit here that's a 7, and that could give us a 1-column shift if they were the lead. But that's also our best defender at 4 versus 3. So if they took a hit, it just wouldn't be that great. But I think this is a key part of the battlefield, so these guys are going to lead. In fact, I think I'll throw them on top to indicate they are leading the attack. There is an optional rule in this game where the opposing player is not allowed to look under the top unit of a stack. Obviously, I'm playing myself, so I'm not going to play by that rule. So that's why I'm okay shifting this guy to the top. But anyway, yeah, so we have to leave unit. Oh, and remember artillery support. So here's an artillery unit. It's rocket artillery. Its range here is 5, so it's clearly in range. It's only 2. And we're going to go ahead and conduct an attack with it, or combat support with it. So you've basically rotated 90 degrees for its attack. Units that are able to attack twice, you would rotate it another 90 degrees, and then there's no unit that can attack more than twice. There's things like helicopters, artillery, and in the advanced game headquarters have these sort of attacks that they can do only certain times. So, okay, let's go back to our combat results table. Okay, so we have that artillery support, so we'll shift 1 column to the right because it's a Russian artillery, so it benefits the Russians. But then the efficiency differential favors the Allies, so we go back 1. And then they're attacking into a city, so we go 2 to the left. So this might be a bloody attack because that's 1-to-1 odds here. But now that we have the odds, we want to allocate attack helicopters and air points. So let's start with the helicopters. Now the attacker may allocate up to 2 attack helicopters to support an attack. The defender may allocate up to 1. And so I think the Russians consider this a key combat here. This is a key position on the map. And I think NATO would think the same. So I think both are going to do the maximum allowed. Let's take a look over here. So over here we have the 2 Russian helicopters. We can see that they have a range of 12, and one has a combat strength of 1 and the other a combat strength of 2. So what we have to do is we have to trace a path to make sure they can get to the combat hex here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's within range. There are penalties to flying over an enemy unit, like on the way to your target. So I wouldn't want to just like fly over, the Poles or the Belgians there. So anyway, so they both fly in. Now I don't have to physically move those helicopters. They're going to stay at that base. So there are some markers I can use to sort of help me remember that 3 combat strength points of helicopter flew in. I wish the game had more of these markers because that's all I get. There's 2 markers. And so I don't have a marker like if I wanted to show like 1 combat strength for the Allies, for example. I suppose I'm supposed to be resolving like air defensive fire and stuff here first, but let's just go ahead and I'm going to use one of these markers. They're for showing that something's been struck with a missile or a helicopter attack or something, but it has a 2 on it, so I'm going to use that because over here we got an Apache helicopter from the Americans. It is within 16 hexes of this, that's its range. So it can support, and I need to be flipping these guys 90 degrees because regardless of what happens, they are spent. Okay, so I'll go ahead and throw a 2 here representing 2 strength points of helicopters from the Americans. And on top of this, we can allocate air points. So in the advanced game, like there's squadrons representing F-15s and B-2s and, MiG somethings or others, and you put together like strike packages and stuff. But in the basic game, you just have like a set of air points, and you can allocate points to the combat. In fact, I could have allocated points to escort these helicopters, I believe, but I'm not going to do that. We have a very paltry amount of air points. The non-allied player has 4, and the allied player only has 2. And in an attack, the attacker may allocate up to 4 air points. And I think they're not going to do 4. I think they're going to just do 2. So I'm marking that off to the side on my little tracking area. Now if the allies, oh, and yeah, so for 2, I guess I'll go ahead and throw a strike marker here to represent. I've also allocated 2 air points. And hey, you folks that play this a lot, or maybe even Mitchell Land, give me some tips on how you track this kind of stuff in terms of like air points and helicopters in a combat. I mean, maybe you just keep it all in your head. But yeah, so I think, let's see, the allies have 2 air points. I feel like they got to throw everything into this, so they're going to throw their 2 air points in here as well. Okay, and now we have to see how many of these aircraft and helicopters actually get to participate in the battle, because there's going to be some air defense fire. Okay, well here's the Standard Games air defense fire chart. If you're starting to think this is complicated stuff, I suppose it is, and it gets more complicated in the advanced game, but in reality, I believe when you're playing this game, you just like point at something, look at a chart, roll a die, bam. Like, I'm just going slow here to help teach. So anyway, let's go ahead and process the air defense fire for the Russians first. So they had 2 air points coming in, and 2 different helicopters, each with a strength of 2 and 1. Okay. Now the scenario rules, the scenario-specific rules state that the Russians, or the non-allied side, has air advantage. So there's various levels of who has the advantage in the air. There's air supremacy, where one side is like completely dominating everything. Air superiority, where pretty good. Advantage, not still good, not as good. And contested, where everyone's equal. So the Russians and Belarusians have an advantage. So all rolls by the firing side, that would be the Allies, against the flying side, the Russians, will be on this chart. And so it's going to be more difficult to harm the Russians because they have an advantage. So let's go ahead and work through these. So we have the air defense fire goes against each helicopter. These represent the 2 Russian helicopters. And then the total of air points spent. So this is the total of air points spent. Let's go ahead and start with the air points. We're going to look at the modifiers. So one of the modifiers is the target hex is in or adjacent to a hex containing an enemy armor or mechanized unit, unless it was an amphibious assault. So there is an enemy mechanized unit in the hex. That's the American armored cavalry regiment. So I looked at all the others that they don't apply. So it's going to be a -1 because there's an enemy mechanized unit in the target hex, or within 1 hex of it. And so we're going to roll here. Got a 5. So look at the 5 row. 5, 6 is over here. Come over here. -1. Nothing. Okay, so we're good. If it had rolled like up, and if we had hit this, it says abort. Air points don't abort, but it says -1. We would subtract 1 air point. If we hit an asterisk, the Russians would permanently lose an air point. So each turn you get more air points. They would permanently lose 1. But their air points are good, so they're going to get 2 air points into that attack. Let's do helicopter with attack strength 1. And again, it's same situation. So it's going to be a -1. Okay, we got a 2. 2 here, -1, 1. So it's again, abort is not applicable. Abort is more for like air transport missions or paradrops and stuff. So it's a -1. So this helicopter's combat strength has been reduced by -1. So I guess That would be 0. So in a way, you can think of all the helicopters as a turnaround. Okay, now for this one. Oops. You got a 4, 4 minus 1. They're fine. Okay. Now for the air defense fire against the Allies. So I'm just going to kind of shift this over here to remind myself that the firing side, the Russians, have the advantage now. So let's roll for a 2 strength helicopter first. And the Russians have lots of mechanized things right next to the target hex, so this is also at a -1. And this is going to be much more brutal. So roll a 2, -1. Okay, and I think I said this was for the helicopter. So the helicopter's combat support strength is going to be reduced by 1, so maybe half the helicopters had to turn around. There's also an asterisk. That means the helicopter, which is turned 90 degrees to show it's been allocated, it's damaged. So flip it to the damaged side. We can see the band on it to indicate it's damaged. So that's too bad. Okay, now for the air points. Again, applying a -1. Oof. Russians rolling really well. Looks like a abort -1. So again, there's no abort for air points, but I've reduced the combat strength. So half the aircraft trying to get through were aborted or just busy. Yeah, so that's it for air defense fire. Next, we calculate die roll modifiers, and there's a lot here, but once you memorize them, it goes fast. I'll just kind of skim through them. So are the attackers coming from 5 or 6 hexes? No. That's a next war Korea thing. You can see the little NWK here, so you can just ignore that, and there's some next war Korea, India, Pakistan, Taiwan, so just those ones you can all ignore. Attacking from 3 or 4 hexes? No, the Russians are attacking from 2 hexes. Are there mountain infantry attacking in certain terrain? No. Are there light infantry attacking? No. Was there a remainder in the initial odds calculation? Yes, it was 21 to 10. So that 1 remainder gives the Russians a little die roll bonus. So I'm going to track the combat die roll modifier here. So that's a -1. You can see right here that the Russians have. So currently they have a slight advantage in die roll. Is the defender in an installation, which is an airbase, a port, a chemical or nuclear facility, an airfield, or a town? Nope. More mountain infantry on the defense? Nope. +1 per additional formation in multi-formation attacks. Well, yes. So the Russians are attacking with 2 formations. Here's a sample of the units there. So they're attacking with 2nd Guards, which is sort of this pinkish orange color. 4th Guards tank, I think, which is sort of this like teal color. And then this 20th Guards, which is white. And white units, they aren't considered formations in terms of this penalty. They can cooperate with any units. But these are 2 different formations, so there's a slight penalty of 2 formations having to cooperate together. So the Russians get a +1 and go back to 0. There's a +1 for combined attacks by different nationalities. Well, it's all Russians attacking right now. Pointing out here, the US, UK, and Canada, apparently, I guess because they all speak English and maybe because they train a lot, are considered the same nationality for this rule. Skip these. Over here, we get, for each combat support point, the attacker subtracts and the defender adds. The most you can get is ±6. So the Russians subtract 4, the Allies add 2, so we're back at a 2 there. And that's it. We're ready to roll our actual combat die. You can see there we're on the 1-to-1 column, rolling a die. This is the Russian player rolling a die. Whoa! Russians are just killing it. And remember, it's a -2 on the combat die roll modifier. The die starts at 0. It's not a 10, it's a 0. So with a -2, they're on the 0 row. Sounds bad for NATO. So it's this indicates attacker losses, defender losses, and effects. So no attacker losses. Defender lose 1 step and must retreat. Let's see how that goes. Okay, the Russians took no losses. The Allies take one loss. It has to come from the lead unit, unfortunately. So this guy is a 3-4. It's going down to a 2-2, unfortunately. Okay, and then we have to process the retreat. So normally if you're like in clear terrain, the terrain determines how far you have to retreat, either 1 hex or 2 hexes. In clear terrain, you would have to retreat 2 full hexes. But since it's a city, it's only 1 hex. And there's some other terrains that reduce it to 1 hex. Additionally, there's different kinds of terrain that allow units to attempt to not retreat. It's voluntary. And city's one of the terrains that allows that. So I think it makes sense for them to attempt to not retreat. And if they fail the attempt, they just retreat. Alternately, in these particular terrains where you can try not to retreat, you can opt to take a step loss from 1 unit to skip retreating. So I'm going to consider that, but let's see if we can just voluntarily avoid retreating. So this is where another case for the quality of your unit comes into play. We pick a unit, and you would usually pick the one with the, I guess we pick the one with the highest efficiency value, and you have to roll less than or equal to the efficiency value. Let me just make sure that's true. Yeah, less than or equal. So we'll just pick the top guy. He's going to try to roll 6 or less to avoid retreating. That's too bad. Rolled a 7. So now I have to decide, do I want the entire stack to retreat 2 hexes, or do I want to take a step loss to try to hold out? It's a tough call. There's not a lot of allied units, but I think what I want to do is like try to slow the Russians down. So I made an error. It didn't affect the game, but I said, oh, you would just always pick the highest number when you're trying to avoid retreat. Nope, you have to pick the lowest efficiency rating. Since they're all the same, I would just have to pick one of these units. I picked this guy, and if you fail your efficiency rating and decide to ignore the retreat, the guy that did the check takes the step loss. So the American 173rd Airborne Infantry Brigade sacrifice themselves to allow the others to maintain hold of Suwalki. Okay, so but the great part of this is we held on. It's only a 3-turn scenario, so we might be able to hold Suwalki. We'll see. All right, we're gonna do another attack. That was a long description of an attack. I just wanted to go through all the little pieces, one by one. So, Belarusians, they want to get in on this stuff. So they're going to attack Bialystok. There's a Polish mech unit there. The reason that is good is because it gives them -1 to air defense fire. All the Belarusians are mechanized. So, we can just do this a little more quickly, but we want to total attack factors, it's 12. The defenders in a urban zone, infantry defense is doubled. These paratroopers are infantry because of the X shape over the para symbol. So it's going to be 8 + 1 for the Polish recon unit, so 9. So 12 to 9. That's 4 to 3 odds, which the closest on the combat results table is 1 to 1. Remember, I put the combat odds for the last battle in the flatter woods row for the odds. Well, this is in urban. It's far to the left. We'll see that in a minute. We also want to determine column shifts. Well, these guys are going to allocate their artillery. So that's going to be 2 column shifts to the right in favor of the Belarusians. Incidentally, artillery, and these are all rocket artillery, can only offer support to a battle if a unit of their formation is participating in the battle. So this blue artillery cannot support these green units, but there's some blue units in the battle, so they're supporting, and this green one's supporting there. So we're good. There's no artillery from the Allied side. Oh, and I should have picked the lead units. I suppose this guy will lead. He's a 5. And I suppose the 82nd Airborne will lead since it's a 7. That's a 2-column shift in favor of the Allies. So it's going to the left again. It's currently back to the 1-to-1 column. Now we're going to allocate artillery and helicopters. Well, Belarusians are sending in this helicopter, so there's one combat support coming in via helos. The non-allied player still has 2 air points. The allies have 0. They are going to have a chance to have some more combat though this turn, potentially on these same hexes. I think they might want to save their air points and just see how it goes here. Yeah, I think so. Now, remember the American Apache? It was damaged and rotated 90 degrees, but helicopters can support twice per turn, so I could turn it this way to indicate it's fulfilled its second mission. However, a helicopter cannot perform 2 missions within the same phase, and we're still in the same phase, initiative, movement, and combat phase, so he'll just have to hang out for some other phase. But off map, we have a Polish helicopter, Mi-24. It can contribute 1 point of helicopter combat support. So that there. And yeah, I think that's all the support. So we're going to do air defensive fire for these guys. Remember, the Russians have the advantage. We'll go ahead and fire at the Belarusians in this case. And everyone's got mech, so there's going to be a -1. I rolled a 4, -1 is 3. That's no effect on this helo. Now the Belarusians are firing on the Polish helo. And they rolled a 4, -1 is 3. That's an abort -1. Unfortunately, these helicopters were forced to turn around. Die roll modifiers. Well, we know there's 1 for the Russians, so they're at -1. Another thing, in urban terrain, and there's some other terrains as well, light infantry has a minus or +1, depending on whether you're attacking or defending. The 82nd Airborne is light infantry, and I know that because it's a yellow number on a black background. And so that's a +1 in favor of the Allies, so that we net out at 0. There are 2 formations attacking, because there's a blue and green. So that's going to be a +1 because it favors the Allies. There aren't multiple nationalities in the attack, so I think I caught all the die roll modifiers. Oh, there was a remainder in the odds calculation in favor of the Russians, so it's a -1. We net out at a 0 die roll modifier. Obviously, I'm doing this all off to the side. I'm going to try to get faster and faster in these battles. Let's go to the combat results table. We're rolling. Die roll modifier 0. We got, oh man, got a 3. 3 is, oh, attacker, 1 loss. Note, we are all the way over almost on the left-hand side of the combat results table because the terrain is urban. So the attackers take 1 loss. Yeah, unfortunately, this is going to be a tough nut to crack, I think, for the Belarusians. So the lead unit takes the loss, and then there's no other effects here. So good job, Americans and Polish in Bialystok. The next part of this phase is the elite reaction movement segment. And I'm saying it's next because those are all the battles I wanted to do. What happens here is, so we're in the initiative phase because there's a player, the Russians and Belarusians, with the initiative. They're like, you know, driving the battle. They're driving the whole campaign right now. They've got the advantage. But during this phase, elite units on the opposing side can attempt to move. And elite units are units with an efficiency of 6, 7, or 8, but they can't be in a zone of control to move. So for example, the French here, they're elite, but they can't move because they're in a zone of control. the Belgians here could. In fact, so like the reason you might want to use this is the Belgians can come over here and bolster the French and Americans over there. But they're already helping this reduced Polish mech unit in Oleko. If they left, it might tempt some other units to come down and attack. So I think they're going to hang out there for the moment. Now, the American 82nd down here in Bialystok, it could move as well. It's elite. I said you can't do this move when you're in enemy zone of control, but an urban terrain cancels enemy zone of control. So they could move too, but they are going to decline.